So today, the first 7 Sundays after the first of the year, Ron and I got to share in 1 or 2 of those. We shared 7 weeks in the book of Acts. We're journeying through the book of Acts as we want to look back so we might see the point of origin, where we started, looking in the rearview mirror so that we might forge ahead or propel us ahead to be the church that God desires us to be His for this time and this place. Last week and the next several weeks until Easter are standalone messages, and then Ron's going to pick up with chapter 8 on the 8th of April. And but boy, we love that, looking at the book of Acts. We love getting into the Word. It's so very important that we're Christ-centered and we're Bible-based. Well, last week, Ron shared a message from the New Testament, and today I want to share one from the Old Testament, and I want to tell you why. For years, and I've had the opportunity to be here for years. I know I'm getting older, and if you can look at the front of the bulletin, I feel older. I went to school, and I still want to be cool. So there you go, old school cool, as we look at the book of Esther. But on Wednesday nights, we are taking the students, and our theme is old school cool. And we're looking back at the Old Testament, at some people, places, and events that are amazing, awesome, as God has used people and spoken people in the past. And we don't want people to think, and teenagers included, or adults, or our kids to think, just because it's old, it's not of use to me today. That is just not true. There's so much we can learn from these Old Testament people, places, and events that can apply to us today and can speak to our hearts and our minds. And we literally, at the end of this semester, when we finish with this series, we will have only gone through Genesis, as we started with Adam and Eve and Noah and Abraham, Isaac, and this last Wednesday, Jacob. And we've shared some of these stories. So I want to fast forward, and I want to bring you to the story of Esther. I was here at Christ Closet yesterday, our clothing ministry, and there are 30 steps that separate this building from our south building. If your legs are shorter than mine, it might be 45, but you get the point. I think we need to be intentional about bridging the gap and realizing that is not a separate church. We are one church. All the ages, the kids, the teenagers, the adults, whatever age you might be, we are one church. So I was talking with Carrie, who couldn't be here today, and every now and then the student praise band and praise team comes over here, and myself or Justin or we'll get a chance to share in the pulpit. But I told Carrie, I think we even need to be more intentional, and could we plan that every 5th Sunday, for example, that the student praise band could come over here and could lead us in worship. I think that will be good exposure to you. It'll be good exposure to them, and they would have time and know when they're going to do it so they could practice and give God all the glory. So we want to intentionally connect and break down any barriers, because there are no barriers. We are one. Okay, so how much do you know about Esther? How much do you know about Esther? Here's some cool things about the story in Esther. You are incredible theological minds and Bible people. You probably know all this stuff, but let me dust this off and let's look at this together. There are 10 chapters in the book of Esther, 167 verses. It takes about 30 minutes to read this powerful book. Esther became queen around 486 BC. While she was queen, she discovered a plot to exterminate all the Jews, while she herself was Jewish. Did you know this about Esther? God is never mentioned in the book of Esther. He's never mentioned. But his hand is moving throughout the book, making it clear that God is at work to guarantee the safety of his people. See, every good story in my mind has a great cast. Listen to this cast. Xerxes, the Persian king. He is mentioned 29 times in the book. He is an arrogant king. If you are at Esther, you can chart with me as I talk about some of these things. You don't think he's an arrogant king? Listen to this in chapter 1. Chapter 1, I'm starting in verse 4. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on the marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver. Oh yeah, he was a little arrogant. And he was a buck stops here kind of guy. He was the king. How about this guy, Haman? Haman is the villain. He's mentioned 28 times in the book of Esther. This guy was even more arrogant than Xerxes and elevated to the second most powerful position in the land next to the king. And he wanted to annihilate the Jews. If you're there, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. He was the villain. How about Mordecai, the hero, the Jew, mentioned 54 times in the book of Esther, uncovers the plot and saves the king's life, and refuses to bow to Haman. And I love this about Mordecai. He passionately intercedes for his people, the Jews. Chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, see, an edict, an order was issued to exterminate his people, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city wailing loudly and bitterly. And then there is Esther. Is she the heroine or the female hero? I don't know, but she is the heroine. 48 times Esther is mentioned. Mordecai's younger cousin, parents were passed away that actually Mordecai took in and treated her like his own daughter. She won a beauty contest and became the queen, and she unravels Haman's plot and helps save her people, the Jews, from annihilation. See, every good story, in my mind too, has twists and turns. Irony has been defined as an unexpected outcome. Listen to some of these. Haman, who intends to destroy the Jews, ends up destroying himself and his family. The gallows, which are an instrument to hang people on 75 feet high, intended for Mordecai, are those which Haman himself is hanged. Haman, in writing his own script for honor and recognition, in fact writes it for Mordecai. I love this summarization point of the book of Esther. At the end of the book of Esther, the world gets turned upside down or right side up. The bad guy, who seemed to be on the verge of a horrible victory, gets hanged. The good guy takes his place in the king's court, and the party of people about to commit a massacre become massacred themselves. Everything runs in reverse, overturning all expectations. See, how much do you know about the book of Esther? As we look about it, it has a great cast. It has twists and turns. But one of the things I love about the Bible is it has incredible life lessons for you and I today. What are some life lessons that we can learn from the book of Esther? Here's the first one. It's in your bulletin. It's very simple, but I want to share this with you. God directed circumstances to bring Esther to power. Chapter 2, verse 17. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. See, Vashti was given the boot because she refused to come and put on a display, thus embarrassed and disrespected the king. The king found her to be more attractive than any other. I don't think that's coincidence. I don't think that's coincidence at all. And here's the life point, the application point for you and I. God directs circumstances in our lives to bring us to position to proclaim His power. I believe that. I don't believe it was coincidence at all that Esther was placed right there at that time for such a time as this. See, God has given you a platform. I believe that. You might not understand it, you might not realize it, but God has given you and I platforms to declare His glory. I believe that. It might not be in the palace, though. There are times in my life, I don't know about yours, that I feel like I'm in close proximity to the King. I feel like the food is good, the bed is soft, it's all good. But there are times I don't feel very close to the palace. There have been times in my life that I felt far away from the palace. Have you? Have you ever felt far away from the palace? There have been times in my life I felt in closer proximity to the porta potties, far removed from the palace, if you understand what I'm saying. But many times in my life, perhaps as yours, it's been somewhere in between. And I guess I'm here to tell you that God is God of all of it. I believe that with all my heart. If you don't believe that, listen to the words of Psalm 139, verses 7 through 10. It's going to be on the screen behind me. You can turn there. I love this. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. How about you? Where are you today in your relationship with Jesus? Are you in close proximity? Are you far removed? Are you somewhere in between? All you have to do is take a step, and God will meet you there. Listen to this quote by C.S. Lewis. I love this. God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. See, God directed circumstances to bring Esther to power. God directs circumstances in our lives to bring us to position to proclaim his power. The second thing I wrote down, and you can fill this out if you would like, God allowed circumstances to occur that required her to use her power. Chapter 3, verses 13 through 14 says this: dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. It was on the Jewish calendar. It was a celebration because no one ever needs an excuse to have a party. But you know what? Haman plotted to have all the Jews in Xerxes' territory exterminated, and all the Jews were set to be annihilated. And she had a choice, with her cousin's encouragement, to go before the king and ask for redemption of her people. And God used her to save, even though God was doing the saving, as he always has done. But you know what? God used her in a mighty way. And Mordecai as well. I went to Bible college at Ozark Christian College in Joplin, Missouri, and they had a theme a couple years ago called Just One. All it takes is one kingdom worker to make a huge impact. As Ozark and many other wonderful Bible colleges and Christian organizations have sent people all over the world to make an impact in people's lives. See, maybe God has you right in your place at such a time as this to make a huge impact for him. It might not be to save a whole bunch of people, but maybe God can use just one to save just one. Isn't that awesome? Wouldn't that be powerful? God allows circumstances to occur in our lives that require us to use our power, which, by the way, is his. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. I believe it's on the screen behind me. Listen to this. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Now, see, right now, you need to know you're special. And you might be thinking, yeah, the person sitting close to me, I've always known they're special. But you know what? You could say that because you are. You're special. Each and every one are. See, the book of Esther to me, in my opinion, but it's a strong one, goes to one word. And it's the word I'm going to put up on the screen right now. Providence. I love this quote that I found. The foreseeing care and guidance of God. Do you believe that? God cares. God guides. God loves you. And he loves others around you and in your life and how your life intersects with theirs. I pray that God would use you and I in mighty ways to influence those outside of the church so that they might come to a saving knowledge of Jesus. Your neighborhoods, your schools, it breaks my heart that some of our kids are fearful of going to schools. It breaks my heart. You know what? May we understand, no matter where we are, God has positioned us and given us a platform to declare His glory, whether it's at a school, it's home, neighborhood, bank, place of business, wherever it might be. God has you where you are for such a time as this. The foreseeing care and guidance of God. I was almost in a wreck the other day. I didn't tell you this, did I, dear? Sorry. Okay, well, about 10 days ago, Icelahoma, or whatever you want to call it, the ice and the weather came in, and it changed things. I think Tuesday it came in, if I remember right, the week before last. Wednesday, Yukon was canceled. Thursday, Yukon was canceled. And Friday, they got a free day because it was already scheduled that way. Well, it just so happens, 2.5 months prior, I had already scheduled to move my mom and my 94-year-old grandmother from a rental in El Reno to an apartment in Oklahoma City. So instead of 30 minutes this way, we'd be driving 8 minutes that way from our house. My mom called frantic. She's like, "What are we going to do?" I said, "We are going to move you." That's it. Doesn't matter, you know, if the rain is there. And by the way, we've loaded the truck. And a good friend of mine helped me. He's here today. Helped me load that truck. And my brother drove up from Dallas. And I was like, we are going to do this. Friday, we loaded up the whole truck and moved in the mist and the rain because we had to do it. Thursday, I drove over there in the morning and the roads were bad. I left from my house in Surrey and we went up Highway 3 or Northwest Expressway, and my thought was I was going to avoid the traffic, but I found something out. No matter where you are, no matter when you are there, there's always somebody crazy that's behind the wheel of a vehicle. Literally, quick story. I was driving about 45 miles an hour, I think it's 55 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour, and somebody came by me, probably about 60, 65, and without anybody else on the road, pulled about 2 or 3 car lengths right in front of me. I was like, "You're not very smart." But anyway, I just kept pressing on. So I'm going and I'm going to turn down Highway 81 south towards El Reno. If you know that, it does a little loop. Is that what it's called? A loop? Anyway, you go in a little circle and you go south underneath the highway. I slowed down. You don't lock up your brakes. You brake just a little bit. I've driven in this stuff. I'm not intimidated by this stuff. Was born in Nebraska, grew up in Missouri, lived in Indiana for 5 years. It's all good. I start turning on that, and my car is not cooperating. I'm turning ever so slightly, probably going 15 miles an hour, and my car starts shooting off the side of the road. And I had no control. Have you ever felt that way in your life? You've got a little bit of no control going on. And in a moment, I said a prayer. Because I was going off the side of the road. Now, there's not a steep drop, but there's an embankment and a slope. So I didn't know really how this was going to turn out. Once again, I'm sorry, dear. I probably should have told you that prior. But I was going, and in a moment, I said a prayer. Now, it was not, "Jesus, take the wheel," like the song says. I'm sorry to disappoint you. But it was more like the Plum song, "God help me." It really was. Because I was out of control. And guys, something crazy cool happened. Because I was going sideways, and all of a sudden, as soon as I cried out in prayer, I'm telling you, it was freaky. All 4 of my wheels locked and grabbed, and I came almost to a complete stop. I'm not that good of a driver to do that, okay? And so many times in my life, I've walked away from a situation like that, and I thought, that was a coincidence. I believe in the providence of God, don't you? That God, the foreseeing care and guidance of God, that He is in control, and He has His hand in your life and mine. See, the main passage, I think it always goes back to, and you probably know this, is Esther chapter 4, verses 12 through 14. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape, for if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish." And who knows? that you have come to a royal position, your royal position, for such a time as this. Maybe you're in your position right now to reveal the power and the restoration of God. Maybe God has given you a platform to point people to the power of the gospel, the good news of Jesus. Providence. Providence. As the team comes up, or at least one of the team, or several of them, it's okay. I continue to be moved at the passing of Billy Graham. And it wasn't how he died or how long he lived, but it was how he lived. Did you see on social media, some of you aren't on social media, but as his casket was going down the streets of Charlotte, people were lined upon the streets and they were holding up their Bibles. Man, I want to go that way. I'm not saying I could ever make any of the impact or as close to it as Billy Graham, but if God could use me, somebody like me, to make a difference in the life of one, He can use you. He can use you to make a difference in the life of someone that'll point him to Jesus. Would you stand with me, please? Can I read this quote from Billy Graham? Don't know how long ago he said it, but he said this: "Someday your life will be over, no matter how much attention you give to your health. Will you look back with regret because you nourished your body but starved your soul?" May we go to the well and drink. Jesus is there for you, and He is there for me. No matter where you are in your proximity with Him, we want you today to take one step closer to the King. Let's pray, and if you have a decision of any kind to make, maybe some of you in here have never accepted Christ into your life and made Him the boss or the Lord of your life, we encourage you to do so. Maybe you have a prayer request that's near and dear to your heart. We believe prayer is powerful and effective. Maybe some of you feel like, you know what, God is calling you to do something. We want to hear from that as well. We have a couple at the back. John and Kathy are back there to receive you for more of a confidential, but we'll be up here, Ron and myself, to meet you and to receive you and to encourage you and to pray for you. Let's pray together. God, thank you for the encouragement that we have through your word, through worship, through song today, through your people. God, I pray that we will understand better that many, many things in our lives don't happen by coincidence, but they're by providence, the hand of God moving in the hearts and lives of your people. Because just as in the story of Esther, you protect and provide for your people today. So God, I pray that wherever we are in our relationship with you, we'll take one step closer to Jesus. It's in His name that we pray.